Got it. So my little buttons seem to have gone away. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to repeat this for the recording. Thanks for joining us for USGBC New Jersey's Demystifying New Jersey Energy Incentives for New and Existing Buildings. And thank you to our panelists. I think we're going to jump right into it now. There we go. Yeah, we're going to jump right into it. I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to Matt Kaplan, our moderator today. Matt, why don't you kick us off and then you can turn it over to the panelists.
Thank you, Medea. And thank you everyone for joining. Good morning. So I'm going to introduce, start off in a moment by introducing Tim Fagan of PSE&G. But first, just to kind of go over the objectives and sort of agenda today. So we're going to focus specifically on incentives for energy efficiency. We're not going to focus on incentives for renewable energy or electric vehicle charging stations, things of that nature. There's a lot of content to get through just on energy efficiency incentives, especially because we are going to cover both new and existing buildings. So we're going to focus just on energy efficiency, but we're going to cover new buildings and existing buildings. Primarily, we're going to focus on for existing buildings, multifamily and existing commercial buildings. We're not really going to focus on incentives for like retrofitting of single family homes. On the new construction side, we are going to focus on really all building types, including single family homes. But we're really going to be speaking largely to, incentives for developers and those involved in the development of construction, not like home buyers or anything like that. So largely this, these incentives are for real estate developers and building owners, but it expands a little bit beyond that. A big focus of what we're going to do today is try to both clarify all the different incentives that are out there, because I'm sure many of you, are aware of different incentives, but don't totally understand how everything works together. So we're going to try to clarify the landscape, and then we're going to try to highlight where there are areas of overlap in the requirements for these varying incentives and where you can kind of, get the most bang for your buck by, using what you're doing for one incentive to qualify for another incentive. We're going to talk about all the nuance kind of overlaps, between the requirements of these incentives. We're going to talk about incentives that are available specifically in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, for existing buildings, the incentives are largely coming from the utility companies. And so we have Tim from PSE&G here today to talk about the incentives that PSE&G offers, which are similar to the incentives that are offered by other utility companies in the state. We're also going to talk about the incentives for new construction, specifically in New Jersey, which come from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and the clean energy program that they operate. And we have John from the New Jersey Clean Energy Program here today, and he's going to talk you through the incentives for new construction from that are available specifically in New Jersey. Then we're going to talk about the CPACE program, which is a new program in New Jersey for financing energy efficiency, and that's brand new. It's just being rolled out. The law to create it was passed a couple of years ago, and it's just getting set up now. So there's a lot of new information there. We have Max from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, who is developing and running the New Jersey CPACE program here to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about the federal energy efficiency incentives. And these are the incentives that you've been hearing about since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act last summer. These are incentives that in some cases existed before that Inflation Reduction Act, but were expanded and modified greatly by that Inflation Reduction Act. And so we have Ben from USGBC's national office in DC here to talk about those incentives. And then after we get through that content, I'm going to try to speak a little bit to try to pull things all together a little bit in advance of opening it up for discussion, and try to highlight, where we see the overlap between the federal incentives and the PSE&G incentives, and the federal incentives and the New Jersey Clean Energy Program incentives, and where CPACE fits into that, and how you can take advantage of multiple of these incentive sources on one building. I'm also going to talk briefly about discounted financing rates that are available for multifamily buildings that implement these energy efficiency incentives elsewhere, and how that fits into the picture. And then we'll open it up for a full-scale audience discussion I have some questions I'm going to ask of our panelists at that time, and we encourage you to submit questions as well. But also, like, please submit questions in the chat as we're going through the panelists. So I'm going to be, just kind of moderating things as these gentlemen kind of go through their presentations. And so if you want to post questions in the chat during their presentation, I may or may not ask them that question of them until the end, but I may, throw it to them, before we get to the next presentation. So please feel free to submit questions on an ongoing basis in the chat throughout the presentations, and I'll kind of, filter them to the panelists at the appropriate times. We'll also open it up at the end, for people to raise their hands and ask questions directly to the panelists. So that's the outline and agenda for today. So, I'm really excited. We have a relatively small group, but I think, we'll get into some good discussion here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to take us through PSE&G's incentives for existing buildings. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. Just starting off, I want to just reiterate what Matt has indicated. So I'll be going over the programs that PSE&G offers. The programs offered by the other electric and gas utilities in New Jersey are all very similar to this. This was a requirement by the Board of Public Utilities for us to provide, common program structures throughout the state. So there's some commonality, particularly for customers who may have properties in varying territories, so that becomes easy for them to understand the programs. But yeah, I'm going to try to bring my slides up, or oops, if
Sure. Go ahead, whichever you prefer. I can do it, or you can do it.
If I can do this.
We see them. It's not in presenter view
It's
yet.
not in presenter. Okay, let's try it now. How's that?
It still looks, oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay.
And you're not on camera, but either way works for us.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, the slides are more important than my face. So, so let me get going. So first, I just want to start off with our vision as a company to have people using less energy, cleaner, and delivered more reliably as ever. And certainly our energy efficiency programs are a central tenet to that. But there are many other ways in which we're working to provide this vision to our customers in New Jersey. This is just a quick review of all the different policy steps that have been taking place at the state level that has supported that support clean energy. And just a quick snapshot of our service territory for those who may not be too familiar with us as a utility. So as you can see, if you envision the turnpike going from the GW Bridge down, down to southern New Jersey, we're pretty much that corridor, plus or minus 25 miles on either side of the turnpike. So from Hudson County down to Middlesex and Burlington, we are the largest utility in New Jersey, the only dual fuel utility in New Jersey. And those numbers kind of as a percentage of the state generally represents about 60% of the load, both on the electric and gas side, and customers as well. I just want to go over this really quick. I know this isn't going to be the focus, but in addition to the commercial programs, we do have a portfolio of residential programs. I will not go through them individually, but if anyone has questions on the residential programs, feel free to reach out to me on those. Pretty much covers a large portfolio of types of solutions for residential customers. So on the commercial and industrial side, we kind of bucket this into four types of programs that represent different solutions for business customers. The prescriptive program is probably the simplest of all of them. This is simply fixed incentives on a series of, we'll call them energy efficiency measures, high efficiency equipment that can be received by a business customer, either midstream, meaning the discount is taken at the kind of point of purchase, particularly through distributors. I think high efficiency lighting is probably the best example of that, where we have a portfolio of distributors that will take the discount for LED lights at the point of purchase. And then there's also downstream rebates, which require the applicant to fill out an application form for other different types of equipment. So we have many trade allies that will work with the customers to fill out and submit the applications. And like I said, for this, the incentive levels are typically fixed, either per unit, depending, or sometimes, depending on the size of the equipment, on a per ton or pill, basis such as that. So that is the most simple one. The custom program gets into measures that don't have simple or predetermined calculations for energy savings. So if you have a, I don't know, a simple example, let's say, if you owned an ice cream shop and you had a piece of ice cream deployment equipment that was high efficiency and is brand new, and there's no predetermined savings for it in our technical resource manual, something, we can incentivize that purchase based on engineering calculations that we would do with you or your installer to determine the savings between the high efficiency piece of equipment and the standard piece of equipment. And this can also be combined to multiple measures as well. So you can see the savings, the standard savings that you get for those $3.50 per therm and 16 cents per kilowatt hour saved. And let me say too that all these the programs I'm describing right now are available to all C&I customers. So whether or not you could be a multifamily a property owner that has centralized equipment, or whether or not you're a building owner of an office building, or a commercial customer doing retail or industrial activity. Our next program is a small business direct install program. So this program, as the title suggests, is targeted to small customers. We consider small customers to be those that have an average peak demand of 200 kW and less. So that actually covers quite a number of our business customers. And the savings here are based on a number of factors, depending on whether it's gas or electric and whether it's lighting or non-lighting. I didn't want to get into too much of the details here, but it does combine the measures together into a project, and the incentive then is calculated specific for that site and that customer. Some of this, we have two different kind of sectors within this. The one sector, which is the closed network of contractors, is targeted primarily to municipal customers, those who are not-for-profit organizations, and those who reside in urban enterprise zones. regardless of what type of small business customer they are. The other part of the program is more of an open network where any small business can work with a contractor to develop a project and submit it as an application for the rebates. One thing I'll mention here that's on this slide, but this actually applies to all of our programs, is that for the non-incentive cost of the project, so the cost of the project that the customer must still pay, we offer on-bill repayments over 5 years, so that essentially what ends up happening is that, you know, there's really no money out the door for the customer. You repay your portion of the project through the PSE&G bill. You know, we'll track it for the 5 years. You'll see it as a line item on your bill. And like I said, that really applies to all of our programs. I mean, you know, with some exceptions, if they're very small measures, obviously the on-bill repayments aren't needed. But when it comes to HVAC equipment, you know, water heating equipment, anything like that, the on-bill repayment is an option that customers can take advantage of. The Engineered Solutions program is kind of a niche program that is primarily used for those who are maybe familiar with the term the MUSH market, right? So municipalities, universities, hospitals, type of customers. This is a fairly detailed kind of concierge service where we provide the customer with an audit at no cost, engineering support to help develop the bid-ready documents on what measures you want to install. The customer will kind of do the final contract with whoever is hired based on the bid information. And then we provide a series of payments through the construction process, and then make the final payments upon completion of the project. The amount of the rebate is dependent on the project economics and the amount of savings. It's essentially designed to make sure that it passes a cost effectiveness test. And then once again, the non-incentive portion can be repaid over 5 years on the PSE&G bill. So like I said, this is a specialized program. Many of you on this call will this probably will not be your first choice, but this is a program we've had for a number of years. We've been very, very successful with. But it does include multifamily housing buildings. So for those of you who may be involved in that sector, this type of solution might be something that you'd be interested in. Energy management is the last piece of this, and there's 2 aspects of this. So one is strategic energy management, and this is more of a longer-term relationship with the customer to look for savings opportunities, mostly non-capital types of projects, but can be a little bit of both. But like I said, it's a long-term relationship with the customer where we seek to optimize and upgrade multiple processes and envelope types of measures throughout the facility. And the other piece of this is something that many of you are probably more familiar with, which is retro commissioning. So this once again is focused more on maintaining the efficiency of the existing equipment and ensuring that it's continually operating at its peak performance level. Not really focused on capital improvements, but it is, we will go in and work with the customer to audit the existing equipment and look for savings opportunities through improved maintenance, or other aspects or low cost means to improve the efficiency of the HVAC and other systems in a building. And then finally, I'll just reiterate the on-bill repayment piece of this. We think that this is a very valuable feature for our programs. It's because it provides the customer the opportunity to limit their out-of-pocket expenses up front and pay over time. I should reiterate that the interest rate on these on-bill repayments is 0%. So it's very attractive from a financing standpoint, and we really have no limit. So whether or not your project is, $50,000 or $5 million, there's no cap. I mean, there are credit requirements for customers to pass, but there are also checks and balances through the credit process too, so that if there are issues on the credit side, there are other paths that we might take with the customer to help improve the credit score to ensure that the customer can be eligible for OBR. So that's really it. Like I said, the other utilities have similar programs. The one thing I'll say on terms of OBR, some of the utilities offer on-bill repayment in the same method PSE&G does. Some of the other utilities offer 0% financing, but it's through a third party. So it's the same benefit in terms of 0% cost to the customer as an interest rate. But for those utilities that do it kind of off bill, it just requires a separate payment to the financing institution that the utility has the relationship with to make those repayments rather than it being included on the bill itself. So I think that's really it. I'm sure at the end there'll be questions, and I look forward to taking them from all of you.
Thank you very much, Tim.
All right, let me stop sharing. There we go.
So I have questions for you too, but I'm gonna hit you at the end as well. All right.
Sure. That's fine. Yep.
All right. So next, I want to introduce John Sousa from the New Jersey Clean Energy Program. John, apologies if I mispronounced your last name there. So as Tim mentioned, New Jersey has this pretty clear dividing line now where rebates and financing for energy efficient existing building is from the utility companies, and for new construction is largely from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, which operates the Office of Clean Energy, which operates the New Jersey Clean Energy Program, which many of you may have heard of. And so John is here today to kind of present and talk about the varying incentives that are available from the New Jersey Clean Energy Program, principally for new construction. So thank you, John. Take it away.
Thanks, Matt, and good morning to everyone on the call. Big thank you to USGBC for hosting this webinar and having me on such an esteemed panel. I'd like to now share my screen, and like Tim, I think you'd rather see my slides rather than my face, but wanted to do that introduction for you all. So just bear with me while I share my slide deck. Okay, so again, my name is John Sousa. I am the outreach manager for TRC. TRC administers the administrative contractor for the BPU's New Jersey's Clean Energy Program. We have administered this program for quite some time through the recent transition that both Tim and Matt discussed, and I have a slide on that as well. It's certainly an interesting time for New Jersey. The landscape has shifted quite a bit. So these are the calls that are really impactful in getting out the message and making sense, demystifying the incentives here in New Jersey. So let's proceed now. So again, the program, New Jersey's Clean Energy Program, is administered by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities Division of Clean Energy. And funding for our programs comes from the Societal Benefits Charge, or SBC. This is found on all publicly served utility bills. A small line item price cost per kilowatt hour that varies, but that's where the money comes from. Oftentimes when talking to clients, customers, they ask that question: is this taxes? Where is this money coming from? And everyone that pays to a public utility pays into this fund through the Societal Benefits Charge. And the goals of our program and the goals really of the outreach team, and I have 8 outreach professionals throughout the state of New Jersey. These folks really are tasked with education, especially since transition. There's a lot of talk about what has happened. Where do I turn to for energy efficiency incentives? And that's been a bulk of our work, is conducting presentations. Sure, I've seen many of you at different events throughout the season. We're often down in Atlantic City throughout the year for events like the League of Municipalities or Conference of Mayors, trying to get to the right audiences, both commercial, industrial, also residential. There are residential programs, as Matthew alluded to. So we'll discuss mainly today the C&I programs, but a bigger part of our goal is to change behavior. It all starts with energy conservation, energy efficiency, of course, as you move up the ladder to pursue some of those renewable technologies. So we really want to change the mindset of residents and businesses in New Jersey and provide these opportunities to all New Jersey residents. There's a big component of equity within our programs, and we definitely use that in our mission to reach out to all New Jersey residents, because they are all eligible. And of course, our end goal is to protect the environment, reduce emissions, and help the governor meet the state's goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. So this is the transition in a nutshell. I do like this slide. It's a bit all over the place, but it really hones in on what happened in June, July of 2021. This arose from the Clean Energy Act of 2018, where the utilities now take charge of their own existing building programs to reduce their customers' use of energy throughout the state. However, Clean Energy Program has been the one-stop shop for many years before transition. And what do we still have? That's really the big question. We do have a couple existing building programs, one being the Local Government Energy Audit Program and the Large Energy Users Program. I have a slide on that shortly. But a bulk of our programs are now lumped into the new construction umbrella for residential, commercial, industrial, and also government customers. You will notice that some of the names of the programs are the same as our quote-unquote legacy existing building programs, and the structure is similar. It's now for new construction and gut rehab. There are some definitions there that I'll talk about shortly as well. As Tim mentioned, all the utilities now have their own programs for existing buildings, both residential, commercial, industrial, and government facilities, efficient products programs, single measure rebates, and as mentioned, SPDI, or Small Business Direct Install, and several other more comprehensive programs. The New Jersey Board of Public Utilities still administers several other programs like New Jersey Comfort Partners. It's a residential program for low to moderate income households. And then the EV solar programs, I won't talk about those today, but also administered by the Board of Public Utilities. So for today's talk, we're going to stick with the right side of this portfolio graph, our chart, the commercial industrial, touch on residential, and specialized energy efficiency really relates to CHP, combined heat and power, which I won't dive into today, but just know that there are CHP incentives that exist through New Jersey's Clean Energy Program. All right, moving on to the C&I sector. Who are C&I customers? Oftentimes, schools ask me, am I a C&I customer? And the answer is yes. So this is, of course, your traditional commercial industrial sites, government schools, nonprofits, institutional, and multifamily properties. Multifamily with a little bit of nuances that we'll talk about later on in my portion of the presentation, but know that multifamily is also lumped into the C&I customer set. As mentioned, the large energy user program is an existing building program. It's one of really our only rebate program for existing building customers. These are for large C&I entities who have paid a minimum of $5 million in the previous 12 months of utility bills. These are the big companies throughout the state of New Jersey. We've done Rite Aid projects in the past. Rutgers has done LEU projects as well. So, the benefit here is the annual savings cap and the incentive value. It's, as you see on the bottom here, it's 33 cents per kilowatt hour and $3.75 per therm, a bit higher than traditional existing building offerings, but these are the folks that are really paying into this program quite a bit. They also are large enough to have the ability to bank funds for up to 2 fiscal years. These are large projects, large customers with the ability to self-invest in energy efficiency, combined heat and power, fuel cell projects. I mean, the whole gamut of projects to improve energy efficiency and resiliency throughout their facility. Maximum incentive here is $4 million, 75% of the project cost, or 90% of the annual NJCP contributions, the lesser of those three. All right, moving right into new construction. So all of the programs that I'll discuss after this point are within the new construction umbrella, and any size new construction or gut rehab project may be eligible for our incentives. New construction projects must exceed the current ASHRAE code 90.1/2016. And I know 2019 is out. Once our programs change to the next fiscal year, we will put out all of the program guides updated to reflect new code requirements and the like. We are still using 90.1/2016 for new construction baseline. Gut rehab. This is sort of a gray area in our program, and oftentimes could be a discussion with the utilities if the project is better suited for a existing building program or mainly a like-for-like incentive project. The utilities want to know what was there before, so they can determine what that new product will be and have a good incentive for that. For New Jersey Clean Energy Program, we have a definition here. One of these three bullets must exist for the program to go through, or the project to go through clean energy. It must be a change of use and reconstruction of existing building, or construction of a nature of work requiring that the building or portion of the building be out of service for at least 30 days, or reconstruction of a vacant structure or portion of that building within. So really, these are the true gut rehab projects, down to studs, changing the use of the space. We've seen all sorts of change of use projects come through Clean Energy Program, including, industrial to indoor horticulture, which is a unique one, or office space to retail, something to that effect. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about new construction. Also applies to substantial renovations or gut rehab. And our first offering for new construction is our single measure program, prescriptive custom style program known as Smart Start Buildings. There is no size to qualify. This is the catch-all program for new construction projects. Individual high efficiency equipment rebates are offered. There is a list of those products on our website. There's also the opportunity for custom design measures, those products that are unique in design or custom by nature. Emerging technologies are also considered in the custom design measure features. Now there is an incentive cap here, $500,000 per electric account and natural gas account per fiscal year. And the custom program has requirements here, and lesser of the last three bullets, 16 cents or per kilowatt hour and or $1.60 per therm saved annually, 50% of the incremental project cost, and buy down to 1 year payback based on the incremental cost, and the lesser of those three. Some of the prescriptive products that are included within our prescriptive list of incentives: electric chillers, gas heating, your lighting controls, of course, food service equipment, refrigeration, and the like. Really anything that consumes energy, there likely is some products on our prescriptive list. And then any other product that is not on that list may prove to be more energy efficient. We're going to look at that and consider those products for incentive through the custom path. Oftentimes, spec sheet analysis, modeling, calculations will be needed to determine cost effectiveness and energy savings. Now, our next program is our more holistic offering. This is our pay-for-performance comprehensive program, and this is for large projects over 50,000 square feet of planned new construction or gut rehab conditioned space. And these projects must be seeking 2 or more different types of energy efficiency measures with a minimum 5% savings compared to ASHRAE code. And there's also that caveat there, 15% savings for multifamily. I have another slide on that as well. The incentive cap for this program is up to 50% of the project cost, up to $2 million per project, or $4 million per entity annually. So really a lucrative program. And I do have other slides to talk about the intricacies of this program and the pathway. But essentially, the more energy efficient your building is, the better the incentive will be at the end of the day. There are 3 different opportunities to receive incentives. 2 are fixed, and then the third is based on a verification of those energy saving measures compared to the initial plan. Now, to close out this C&I section, I always like to talk about a recent project, and this one here in South Brunswick ShopRite was a good success. And we've been highlighting this in some presentations. They utilize the pay-for-performance program, comprehensive offering again for LED lighting controls, roof insulation, custom refrigeration, with pay-for-performance as well. We all know how important the building envelope is in any building, new construction specifically. That can be factored into the incentive based on energy modeling, that sort of thing. So keep that in mind as well. It's not just confined to equipment, it's also building envelope potentially. Project size here, over 71,000 square feet, which ended up saving the customer over $24,000 in annual energy, and over 1,000 megawatt hours of electricity annually. I'm going to briefly touch on residential new construction. There are 4, we say 4 levels, but really 3 levels of participation: Energy Star, Zero Energy Ready, Energy Star Homes and Energy Star multifamily new construction. And our team will work with raters, potential customers on these offerings and bring them through the process from start to finish. The caveat here being multifamily, there are opportunities to use other programs for multifamily because multifamily can be considered a C&I entity. And that has to also do with metering as well. If a multifamily building is centrally metered, the tenants don't pay their individual utility bills, they could use Smart Start rebates. And for new construction as well, their pay for performance offering is on the table, must achieve a minimum of 15% energy savings compared to ASHRAE code. The same incentive cap is there as well. And there's also the opportunity to use multifamily new construction through Energy Star. So some choices here for multifamily projects. Again, the only change here from the previous pay for performance slide is the 15% savings compared to ASHRAE code. Low-rise and mid-rise complexes, garden-style complexes will be treated as one project under the pay for performance program, but must meet or exceed the 50,000 square feet of planned conditioned space. Also with pay for performance, this goes for both the C&I and the multifamily, is that you will partner with a pre-approved participating contractor, pay for performance partner, we call them, who works with you through all the stages, works with the customer, works with the contractors throughout the stages and phases of the program. They are well versed and trained to assist with the application and ensure the maximum amount of incentive is utilized for that project. Also for residential new construction, we rely on our raters. That is, we say, the third arm of outreach. Our team does a lot more C&I focused outreach because we rely quite a bit on our raters to our rating organizations, rating companies to do some of the outreach work, and they've done an excellent job filling our pipeline with residential projects. This is the website where you can find qualified raters throughout the state. And that is all for me. This is my contact information. Again, would be happy to chat with any of you after this session, dive into some of our programs, and yeah, talk more about how our programs can be beneficial to your customers and clients. Thanks, Matt. I'll toss it back over to you.
Thank you, John. All right. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Max Frank of New Jersey Economic Development Authority to talk about the Garden State CPACE program. Max will kind of, I think, explain not only the program, but maybe a little bit about what CPACE is. It's sort of a new thing. New Jersey is not the first place to have a CPACE program, but it's still a new concept, and it is potentially incredibly powerful incentive for facilitating investment in energy efficiency as well as other sustainability measures. And so it's really exciting that New Jersey is launching their program, and we're really grateful Max came here today to talk to us about it. So Max, thanks, and take it away.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Frank. I work for the EDA, which is the Economic Development Authority. It's New Jersey's principal agency for driving economic growth. Specifically in the EDA, I'm on the clean energy team. I focus primarily on CPACE, which is a very large program and can be complicating at times for people who are not familiar with it. But hopefully I'll be able to, as the title of this webinar states, demystify any kind of mysteries around this program. Beyond CPACE, I also touch on hydrogen and fusion. So kind of the more advanced types of clean energy, but hopefully, positive future in the state. So that said, I'm going to share my screen here. Can you guys see that?
Perfect.
Great. All right, so The program, we gave it the name of Garden State CPACE, not New Jersey CPACE, because there's a nonprofit that is already named New Jersey PACE. So just, it is Garden State CPACE. Don't get confused. So as an overview, the statute was authorized back in August of 2021, and basically it enables eligible property owners to undertake certain kinds of improvements and then repay those improvements back through a special assessment on your property, similar to property tax. So it would be billed annually and paid quarterly. It is a senior non-accelerating transferable lien. So senior, and it's subordinating mortgage holders. So it becomes senior to mortgage holders, which is, I'm sure we're going to touch on that later during more discussion. Non-accelerating, which is a big appeal, and transferable. So it transfers with the sale of the property. So there's really less, there's less worries from the capital provider standpoint. Like I mentioned, the repayment operates similar to property taxes. And here it says EDA is responsible for developing the guidelines, which are now out for public comment. So feel free to go review those if you guys want a lot more detail. I couldn't possibly go through all the detail in this short amount of time. They are quite lengthy, about 30 plus pages. And you'll also see here, EDA is also responsible for creating the uniform assessment documents. And those are the legal documents, such as the model opt-in ordinance for the municipalities, the participation agreements, the program agreements, and I'll touch on that in a few slides. And finally, on this slide, we have eligible properties, and that's also included on another slide. But, just laying out the ground terms here, we have commercial, industrial, agricultural, and multifamily homes that have 5+ dwelling units. So basically, every kind of property is eligible except for single family or multifamily 4 units and less. Everything else is eligible for the program. And I do want to add one important note here, just in case there's any kind of confusion, because I had to address this in a previous webinar that I was speaking on. So there is currently another CPACE program. It's not called CPACE, but it acts very similarly in the state of New Jersey. It is administered by the Department of Community Affairs, and it is similar in the, to the fact that it allows for eligible, it has energy efficiency improvements, but it's really just limited to energy efficiency improvements. And the only way to finance that is really through bond issuance, through county improvement authorities at the time. So the CPACE program, the Garden State CPACE program, which is what we're discussing here, will really expand on this. And the DCA's program will sunset once the EDA publishes all of the material needed on the website, on the CPACE website, which I will share that link in the chat later, so everyone has access to that. And there are similar slides on that website that you guys can feel free to look through as well. So let's move on here. So this is just a slide that shows different kinds of improvements. Essentially everything, all the different kinds of improvements for CPACE are statutory. So they are energy efficiency, renewable energy. I know, Matt said earlier that this wasn't really about renewable energy and electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but that is eligible within CPACE, as well as energy storage, which is now becoming a big topic, water conservation, and then resiliency. So we have flood-resistant construction, hurricane-resistant construction, and stormwater management. And these we think are going to be particularly of interest down the shore where, sea levels are rising, hurricanes are getting more intense, etc. So I'm not going to read through all the different details on the right side of the screen here, but again, feel free to read through those at another time. But, just to give an example, energy efficiency, you have natural gas, propane, insulation. This energy efficiency is not simply tied to, green, what people might think of as just green. This is, natural gas is eligible, propane is eligible, so long as it is showing some kind of improvement from the base level, the baseline that was established with the existing building prior to the improvement. And this is just for retrofits. New construction, I'll touch on the final slide of this presentation, but simply put, we're not there yet. We're still developing those guidelines. So this slide is really just going over some terminology. So like I mentioned earlier, eligible properties, you have industrial, agricultural, commercial, common areas of condos is another one. It has to be a parcel of real property, and it needs to be located within a participating municipality. So I'm not sure if there's anyone, here who is representing a municipality, but on another slide, I will include what needs to happen for a municipality to participate in the program. But basically, it's going to be 2 documents. It's going to be a model opt-in ordinance. And for a project to be participating in the Garden State CPACE program, it needs to be in a municipality that has opted into the program. So, if there's no opt-in from the municipality, then unfortunately the project can't happen. So we're urging as many people as we can, the different stakeholders, to kind of discuss with their municipality, at whatever level it needs to be discussed, to really pay attention to this program. So when the program does finally launch, which we're hoping for September, October, but subject to change. But once it launches, we're hoping that municipalities opt in immediately and projects can get underway as soon as possible. Moving on here, though, we have, the standard stuff: no bankruptcies, no defaults on mortgage loans, stuff like that. Eligible owners. So the eligible owner needs to be the legal or beneficial owner of the eligible property, or they can be duly authorized by the legal or beneficial owner. So really, if you're not the legal owner, a beneficial owner would maybe be someone who has a triple net lease and they're responsible for essentially, everything as if they were kind of owning the property, even though it's not really theirs. And again, they can't be subject to any bankruptcy proceedings. Now, for costs, it's the pretty standard, direct and indirect costs. Essentially, the program, you can finance 100% of project costs through the Garden State CPACE program. But they need to be relevant to the program. So you can't, you can't go and try to bundle the acquisition price, the cost to acquire the property, because first of all, you already own the building. And second of all, that wouldn't be considered direct or indirect costs. Now, acquisition is more relevant for new construction when you may be purchasing a building or purchasing a property that's vacant, but still, even for new construction, you cannot include the cost of the property. Additionally, some costs you can bundle are the program fees. So I don't have those included, but they are in the guidelines. They're pretty standard. We tried to make them as reasonable as possible and very appealing. So we are still working on those, as again, the guidelines are out for public comment. So everything is subject to change. And I will say we've received comment about the fees, amongst other things. So, the program is far from perfect, but that is again why I urge everyone to go take a look and submit comment if they have any. And finally, on this slide, the financing terms. So pretty simply, EDA is not really regulating any kind of financing terms. Really, the only thing we're requiring is a debt to value ratio not exceeding 90%. And that 90% is 90% of the value of the property after accounting for the improvements that would be, contributing to the total value. Beyond that, we have a maximum term length that should not exceed the weighted average useful life of the improvement, or 30 years. And the calculation for determining the weighted average useful life is also in the guidelines. Although unsure which section, but definitely, look through the table of contents. Also, we are requiring per the statute that a project, a property owner must obtain mortgage holder consent. And again, more on that later, I'm sure, with questions, because I'm sure a few people are wondering why in the world would a mortgage holder ever consent to having their mortgage subordinated to this. But there is actually good reason. And finally here, there is no minimum savings to investment ratio. So if you are familiar with CPACE programs around the country, a lot of programs do actually require this, this ratio, and they set a number for it. And a lot of programs like to see projects coming in with saving to investment ratios over 1, which basically means that the project would be cash flow positive and, therefore saving more money than using, essentially. But for the Garden State CPACE program, we are not requiring a minimum savings to investment ratio, although we are requiring that project applicants do calculate the ratio, but we're really just doing that so the applicant is simply aware of the, the potential benefits or even maybe disadvantages of pursuing the improvement. But again, it won't bar you, given a certain number, you are still able to participate in the program. So this slide just shows a few of the benefits to the different stakeholders. So there are really 5 main stakeholders here. You can see them up across the top of the screen: property owners, municipalities, mortgage holders, contractors, and capital providers. So I'm not going to read everything on here, but in layman's terms, property owners are getting better term financing. They're getting longer terms. They're getting better interest rates, and there's no personal guarantees. So essentially, there's no recourse to the business owners. So basically, the only collateral is the subject property. The capital provider can't go after any of your other assets beyond the subject property. For municipalities, CPACE, assuming the municipality opts into the program, municipalities are really able to help support their measures related to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants, as well as resiliency measures. Depending on where they are, it's more applicable to some than others. And also, they get to enhance their tax base because the property improvements, are increasing the value of the property. Now, for mortgage holders, again, this is, there's a long conversation here that could be had, but more mortgage holders are becoming more comfortable with this, especially because CPACE programs exist in, 30 plus states across the country. And there's been thousands of projects that have been financed through CPACE. But again, mortgage holders are becoming okay with this because CPACE is essentially enhancing the value of their collateral, which you see right in the center of the screen in big bold letters, which is not a coincidence that it's in the center and also bolded. And contractors here are getting 100% of the upfront cost needed for projects. So that is helping contractors convert leads because they know that the money is there. And finally, capital providers. They're getting extremely strong loan security because of the nature of the senior lien. Let's move on here. So this is just a quick slide I threw together that shows kind of the flow of money and the flow of services. On the left side of the screen, you're going to see some of the documents that are required for the application. This is just a handful of them. There is quite a few, there's a bit of information that we are requiring, but again, it is subject to change as we go through the public comment period. But looking at the flow on the right side here, basically once a project is approved by the EDA, and the EDA, just disclaimer here, the EDA will not be lending for CPACE projects in the state, at least for the time being. That is also possibly going to change down the road, especially as we work towards the potential of a green fund, which would be established with the help of RGGI money, which is Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. I definitely urge you guys to go check that out as well, because there's a bunch of interesting things happening with that. So it's RGGI, RGGI. But looking at this flow, you have the loan will close after being approved. Then the capital provider will provide the money upfront to the property owner, who would give that money to the contractor. The contractor would then install the improvement or multiple improvements. And then later, the property owner makes regular payments to the municipality through an assessment agreement. That's the assessment, similar to the property tax bill. And then the municipality, through an assignment agreement, submits that money back to the capital provider. And then, so on and so forth. Now, this is the slide I was talking about with the qualification and responsibilities for the different parties. This one's municipality, the next one's capital provider. Just real quick, like I mentioned, municipalities are required to opt into the program. EDA will be providing that opt-in ordinance. It'll just need to be amended slightly. And then there will also be a Garden State Program agreement. These are things that are not public for comment yet, but they are coming soon. And the program agreement is an agreement between two parties, being the municipality and the EDA. And then there's a few responsibilities here. It's really entering into the agreements and then remitting the assessment back to the capital provider. And then, ultimately enforcing the assessment if need be, likely through the act of foreclosure. some capital provider qualification and responsibilities. They, simply need to just meet the requirements set forth in the guidelines, and then they need to apply via a qualified capital provider application. And then if they are accepted, assuming they meet all the eligibility requirements, they need to enter into a participation agreement with the EDA. That is a one-time thing per capital provider. So, don't be confused. It's just, it happens once, it's not per project. And then responsibilities, you're entering into the financing agreement. And just going back a few slides, the financing agreement is pretty limited. As long as you hit that 90% and that 30-year max term length, it's the rest of the terms are really just up to the property owner and the capital provider. EDA doesn't really want to be involved in that. We'll just ask for a final term sheet upon closing. Another, some more responsibilities here. Again, collecting and remitting the closing fee from the project applicant to the EDA, and then ultimately providing an annual report to the EDA on the performance of the direct financing. Now, this is the slide that I promised earlier. This shows you the different documents and who's party to each document, and then the frequency of the document use. I'm not going to read through this because it would probably bore you all, but it's here for reference. I believe this is actually the only place that you can find this. So, take a screenshot, save this for later, review the recording, whatever you want to do. But I think this is very helpful and answers a lot of questions. Now, key next steps, and I hope everyone's had fun, but this is the last slide here. So, key next steps. So, like I said, uniform assessment documents are still being reviewed by the Attorney General's office. We hope to have those public ASAP. Those will be made public for comment, and then they will remain out for comment with the guidelines. So I'm not sure if anyone was on a previous webinar where I had mentioned the deadline for comment on the guidelines was May 15th. That has now been extended essentially indefinitely until the legal documents have been made public, and then it'll probably be 30 days, just in case anyone's interested in, in reading into the very details of the program. But those uniform assessment documents are essentially everything on here except for the very top item being the guidelines. Everything else is to come. And the second thing here is phase 2, which is going to encompass the new construction and refinancing expansion. And not much detail on that, but the guidelines have been, there's a draft of the guidelines that I've sent over to where they need to be. They are currently on a hold basically for the time being, because we want to get the retrofit out first, but we do intend on revisiting new construction as soon as retrofits becomes available. But on a timeline, we're probably looking for, we're looking at around sometime in fall, maybe early winter. Yeah, so that said, that is all I've got. I'll stop sharing here.
Thank you, Max. That was really informative. Obviously, a lot of nuance to digest. CPACE is by definition complicated, but it's also incredibly impactful in practice. So we're really excited to see it roll out. Since we're getting tight on time, I want to quickly turn it over to Ben Evans to talk about the federal incentives, mostly tax incentives, but also some other incentives that are available at a federal level, which means they're also available in New Jersey. And many of these are recently updated by the IRA. So I'm sure you've been peppered with all sorts of content from people about the IRA. And so Ben's here to kind of highlight what the main incentives are for energy efficiency. Thank you, Ben. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Hey, everybody. Yeah, Ben Evans. I am the Federal Legislative Director at the U.S. Green Building Council. Great to be here and great to see so many terrific programs in New Jersey. You guys really have a lot going on, and that's exciting to see, and I'm sure it's going to stimulate a ton of activity. I am going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. USGBC, I have worked on a lot of the provisions that were in ended up in the Inflation Reduction Act for a number of years. A lot of these were ideas that have been floating around for 5 or 6 years, and had standalone bills and things like that. And finally, after sort of beating our heads against the wall for a number of years, made it into law. And it's a really exciting time, I think, after the federal government has been sitting on the sidelines in many ways, to have some really strong new policy. It's, you know, sort of an unprecedented climate bill. Nothing of its size or scope has ever been passed in the U.S. And I think it's gonna it's gonna drive a ton of activity in the building space. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we got a lot of really much stronger policy around buildings, not just for energy efficiency. I know Matt mentioned we're just talking about the efficiency stuff, but for you know, the broader sort of universe of green building components, it's a really great package. I'm going to focus in, as Matt said, on a couple of tax incentives. Before I do, I know, you know, we've been talking about the Inflation Reduction Act that passed almost a year ago in August of last year. I know there is some frustration on the ground of, you know, when is this money really going to arrive? When are we going to see grants and tax incentives that we can act on? And, you know, what I'll say there is I think that the federal agencies are working really hard to get all these programs out. Again, it's an unprecedented package, and it's a ton of, you know, very detailed and complex programmatic work that they have to do to set these things up, including Treasury and DOE and EPA. And so they're working hard at it. I think, you know, their guidance is starting to come out a little bit at a faster clip. I think by the end of this year, we will have a lot of the answers that folks are looking for. But, you know, I think we're just unfortunately going to have to be a little patient until then, until we have all those answers, because it's hard to make, you know, these decisions without, you know, seeing what exactly the regs are going to be. And in some cases, there are still pretty significant open questions around some of these incentives and other programs. So we're just going to have to be patient. I think that the flip side of that is this is long-term policy. These are 10-year incentives for the most part. In some cases permanent. 179D is permanent. And so we think that level of predictability and certainty around them will drive a huge amount of activity, and that once we have all the answers, we're going to see a lot of uptake in the market. And as Matt mentioned, they are very well aligned, maybe not directly aligned with every, you know, in every program with some of the state program components, but definitely in the same direction, directionally aligned between, you know, with the state programs. And I think we'll have a lot of complementary value there. So I'll start with the Section 45L tax credit this is for residential new construction for both single family and multifamily. We'll focus on multifamily here. So this previously 45L was capped at $2,000 for meeting what was usually an outdated IACC reference in the statute that they didn't update very often. And so and it was also because it was tied to IACC, it was 3 stories or less. They've changed this now, and so it's expanded to $2,500 for meeting Energy Star and $5,000 for meeting DOE's Zero Energy Ready program. And by doing that, that also freed up that restriction. It's now available to any size multifamily project. So there is no restriction on the size of multifamily, and that is per unit, $2,500 or $5,000 for meeting those. To get that full value, you have to meet, for multifamily projects, not single family, but for multifamily, you have to meet some prevailing wage provisions. And we can talk a little bit about what those are in a sec. If you don't, it's a significantly reduced credit of $500 or $1,000 per unit. This tax credit does not have a direct pay or transfer or refundability element like some of the other ones, unfortunately, but they have made it clear that the credit can be used alongside LIHTC without reducing your LIHTC basis, which is a pretty critical thing for projects that use that. And so it makes it more attractive for affordable housing projects there. 179D. So the other big efficiency, this is for commercial buildings, the 170 tax deduction for efficiency improvements. If you're familiar with 170D, probably somewhat frustrated by it. It's been a little bit clunky and not terribly lucrative. $1.80 per square foot has been the typical where it's been for since it was created, I think in 2005, for meeting for achieving 50% better than an ASHRAE 90.1 standard. And I think the last standard under the previous regime was 2007. So $1.80 square foot for meeting that static bar, and that's been increased under the IRA to a sliding scale of $2.50 to $5 for projects that achieve 25 to 50% better performance than the relevant ASHRAE standard. And I'll talk a little bit more about which ASHRAE standard will apply in what years. But essentially, it just gives it a little more flexibility of if you're building this is a little more intended for new projects. If you can hit that 25 to 50% mark, you get the corresponding tax deduction there per square foot. Again, receiving the full credit here requires meeting prevailing wage and apprenticeship provisions. If you don't, the deduction drops to 50 cents to $1 per square foot. So pretty steep decline there. Unlike many of the other incentives in the IRA, this incentive is permanent. It was actually made permanent in 2020. And there's no expiration date in law, which is what all the other ones do. So it's in place until Congress decides until Congress decides to repeal it, if they do. And it's adjusted annually for inflation as well. So it will go up. We'll see it go up every year, presumably. If you're familiar with 179D, you know that public entities have been able to take 179D by transferring or allocating the deduction to the primary designer of a project, an engineer or architect working on the project. That provision has been expanded so that any kind of nonprofit entity, and that includes your universities, bush market kind of folks, can do that as well. Can allocate it over to the primary designer of the project, who can then take the deduction, and that can be sort of baked into the value or into the bids and things like that. And another big important change that they made, and we're excited about this, is that it creates a new pathway for existing building retrofits to more easily access the deduction. So if you're an existing building, to get the same sliding scale of $2.50 to $5, you simply have to demonstrate 25% to 50% EUI improvement over your baseline over 1 year. So your previous energy performance, your previous EUI, you show it's 35% better. After your renovation project, you get a $3.50 deduction per square foot. So we're very hopeful that that's going to be much more helpful for existing projects and much more easier for them to use. We don't have exactly that's one of those areas where we don't have the specific guidance of how that's going to work. We think it will be through Energy Star Portfolio Manager or something like that, how you can track and demonstrate that EUI improvement. It's complex in terms of what ASHRAE 90.1 standard will apply. The bottom line is the applicable standard is the latest ASHRAE 90.1 standard that DOE and Treasury have approved 4 years prior to the building being placed in service. 179D previously has been 2 years prior to starting construction. They switched it from starting construction to place in service, I think, because the IRS feels like it's easier to track. And then they've made it 4 years to give a little bit more of a glide path for folks to have some certainty about what ASHRAE standard would apply by the time their project is placed into service. Bottom line is there's a backstop in the law. So for the next few years, you're going to have to do 25 to 50% better than 90.1 2007. And then after that, starting in 2027, that will jump to ASHRAE 90.1 2019. So a pretty big jump there in 2027. So if you can finish a project before, by 2026, you've got a pretty low bar in terms of qualification. And then after that, it gets a lot steeper. And we expect that will continue to evolve every few years. Again, this is permanent. So that ASHRAE standard will be adjusted, we believe, every few years. That's the expectation. Prevailing wage, I'm not going to go over these, but we've got links in here for what, IRS has issued guidance around what the prevailing wage requirements are, and the apprenticeship here. The Department of Labor publishes prevailing wages in given regions, and those can be accessed. And then also the apprenticeship requirements for 179D. It's really a percentage of the number. You have to have apprentices It's a certain percentage of the number of folks working on the project. A couple of quick, and I know we're running short on time here, so I'm going to just try to run through these. These rebate programs, there's the tax incentives under the IRA, and then there are the grant programs, which have more sort of fixed costs. These are grants through the state. This money is going to go through the states. It's expected to be distributed to the states this summer, and then perhaps going out the door early or mid next year. But overall, it's about it's more than $8 billion in rebate funding for home energy efficiency rebates and home electrification and appliance rebates. There's a lot of information on this slide. For multifamily, both of these programs apply for multifamily, and it can be pretty lucrative. For the first one, for home efficiency rebates, it's up to $400,000 for multifamily buildings, and doubling that if the multifamily buildings have a certain percentage of a low and moderate income residents. And then similarly, the home electrification appliance rebates are all for low and moderate income households, and that can include multifamily. And the rebates under that are pretty significant, capped at $14,000 per unit. So some very significant rebates there through DOE and the state energy offices. HUD recently announced this Green and Resilient Retrofit program, which is it's nearly $1 billion in grants with up to $4 billion in loan authority for retrofits of HUD-supported multifamily affordable housing projects. Awards of between $750,000 and $20 million per project. So obviously, some pretty significant financial assistance available there. They've broken it up into a few different buckets of types of projects they're looking for. And they've got a lot of, actually HUD's done a really good job of getting really good information out. This one is out for comment right now, actually, and I've got a couple of links there that you can see to find more information on that one. Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, this is really a green bank program that's being set up, and I think the big thing here, it's $27 billion. For context, IRS's annual budget is, the EPA's annual budget is about $10 billion. So it's a very large new program under the EPA. $7 billion of that is carved out as a solar, low-income solar and community solar program. But the other $20 billion is really sort of for general projects. And the big thing to know there is that in their guidance on this that was put out recently, and this is due in no small part to the advocacy of USGBC and others, EPA put existing building retrofits as a priority project for that $20 billion in funding. Retrofits of existing buildings as one of the 3 priority funding areas for the $20 billion buckets there. So this is going to be low cost financing. Not sure it's going to be as low as some of the New Jersey programs that were mentioned earlier, John, but it's intended to be low cost financing and for all sorts of climate projects. And we've got some examples here in what EPA put out in their guidance. I will stop there. I'm happy to take questions offline. My contact information is here, but I will stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so I there's some things I want to wrap up to try to pull some of these things together to highlight for people. But before we do that, because we may sort of bump up against time, I do want to clarify the prevailing wage question that Wayne posted. So as Max said, basically CPACE doesn't trigger prevailing wage. End of story. As Ben was talking about for the tax incentives, the 45L and the 179D, neither of those require prevailing wage. However, if you meet prevailing wage requirements, the tax incentive is enhanced, basically. And so for 179D, that's true for all types of buildings. There's one level of tax deduction you get if you don't meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and a higher level if you do. For 45L tax credit, the same thing, except when it comes to single family and townhouse projects, they get the same amount. There is no prevailing wage at all. But for multifamily projects for 45L, the amount increases if you meet prevailing wage. For the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebates, John didn't touch on this, but there is a New Jersey law that states that prevailing wage requirements apply to projects receiving financial assistance from the BPU, except for single families, townhouses, and apartment buildings 4 stories or less. And so anything else, would be subject to the requirements of that law. I think it's worth noting, and that law, by the way, for anyone who wants to know, is New Jersey statute. I'm going to just post the link in the chat now. This is not something that like the clean energy program, and John, tell me, I'm sorry to speak for you here, but we're just running out of time. So the New Jersey clean energy program does not enforce or manage this requirement. It is a law that in theory would be enforced by the Department of Labor, but applies to financial assistance from the BPU, which includes New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebates. So with all that said, Tim, PSE&G rebates, prevailing wage law, prevailing wage requirements?
Sure. So for our engineered solutions program and for our closed network within the direct install program, we require prevailing wage. For the other programs and for the simple prescriptive rebates, there is no prevailing wage requirements.
Got it. Okay, so for New Jersey Clean Energy Program, it kind of depends on your building type. For PSE&G, kind of depends on it depends on what program, which is also somewhat dictated by your building type a little bit as well, right, Tim? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that's the prevailing wage question, Wayne. Thank you for raising that. It's a really big point, because if you meet prevailing wage requirements, you can access the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebates or PSE&G rebates unencumbered. You can get the maximum federal tax incentives. If you don't, then you have to kind of look at these requirements as these programs apply specifically. I don't see any questions submitted, so I just want to touch on a few things briefly. I'm going to skip through some slides here. I was going to talk through like kind of how you earn the certifications for the 45L tax credit, but I'm going to skip through that. Here's what I want to kind of focus on. The 45L tax credit for Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready homes that Ben talks about directly overlaps with the New Jersey Clean Energy Program residential new construction rebates. There's two levels of New Jersey Clean Energy Program residential new construction rebates, one for Energy Star, one for Zero Energy Ready homes. That's the exact same structure that the IRA has for the 45L tax credit. So the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebates came first, and the IRA modeled the updates to 45L in the same fashion, not necessarily intentionally, but it's just like both the clean energy program and the 45L tax credit are just incentivizing you for doing the federal government's two major residential energy efficiency programs, one which is Energy Star from the EPA, and then the higher one, which is Zero Energy Ready homes from the Department of Energy. And so if you meet these if you do these certifications, you can get both the 45L tax credit and the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebate, factoring in prevailing wage restrictions, which I've kind of taken into account here. And the amounts can be really significant, right? The 45L credit maybe on its own wouldn't compel you to do Energy Star. Maybe the same thing for the New Jersey Clean Energy Program. But when you combine those two, the amounts can be very effective. And the projected numbers I have here for New Jersey Clean Energy Program are rough estimates because the formula does vary a little bit based on the exact energy savings achieved. But the point is meant to demonstrate just New Jersey has really significant incentives. The residential incentives for New Jersey Clean Energy Program are higher than in New York. They're higher than in Pennsylvania. They're easily comparable within Connecticut. It's one of the most generous programs in the country. So when you can combine that with the federal incentives, it's really significant opportunity. In addition to that, for multifamily developers, if you earn the Energy Star certification to qualify for the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebates or the 45L tax credit, you also are going to qualify for a discount on your permanent financing or construction financing, but most developers don't use construction financing from HUD, Fannie Mae, or Freddie Mac because they have prevailing wage requirements. But when they refinance their mortgage, they get a discount on that mortgage if they have the same certification. So like if you do Energy Star, you can get the New Jersey Clean Energy Program rebate, the 45L tax credit, and you can get a discount on your financing, your permanent financing. Oh, and if you want, you would also easily meet the eligibility requirements to use CPACE financing for construction as well, right? So all of these things, overlap. Also like on 179D. So as Ben talked about, the energy savings for new construction, currently for any building placed in service by the end of 2026 is ASHRAE 2007. Okay, New Jersey's construction code is ASHRAE 2019 now. So simply for anything that you're building between now and the end of 2026 is probably going to qualify for 179D just by meeting code. And certainly if it's going through the pay for performance program where it has to be 15% or 5%, you know, depending on commercial or multifamily, as John talked about, you know, above the applicable ASHRAE code, right? I mean, this graph is kind of meant to show like, here's ASHRAE 2007 efficiency. Here's ASHRAE 2016, which is the P for P baseline. New Jersey's construction code is down here. So until the end of 2026, New Jersey is so far ahead of the national baseline for 179D that virtually any project would qualify. And then for existing buildings, you know, too, as Ben talked about, there's now an easier pathway for existing buildings. If you're going through that, that's also going to, if you're going through PSE&G's rebate programs to update an existing building, you have the potential to meet the 25% energy savings and existing energy to also qualify for 179D for the existing building. And obviously you can use, you know, CPACE, you know, as well to finance those improvements and, you know, take the benefits that Max mentioned. Lastly, you know, pending further IRS guidance, it's not totally clear that multifamily buildings can't also both use 45L and 179D as well, in addition to, you know, combined federal incentives, in addition to combining New Jersey incentives on top of that. So, you know, the key value for these projects, like a lot of people, there's tons of like sort of, you know, spam con about the IRA, right? And all these incentives. And a lot of them just kind of push like the sort of top line numbers and then don't really get into, oh, well, you have to meet prevailing wage to do this, right? Or all these kind of other things, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, people that are just kind of pushing that. And it's just sort of this like, you know, rush, oh, there's all this free money, like Obamacare, free phone, just like everyone just like, it's like, no, it's actually like the requirements are real. But if you layer the federal incentives with the local incentives in New Jersey, which has been noted are among the most substantial in the country, the combination of the utility incentives, the New Jersey Clean Energy Program incentives, and now CPACE launching, by layering these incentives and financing sources together, it's where you could actually start to drive profitability for investment in energy efficiency. And so none of this is a giveaway. None of this is free. But if you take the time to piece these things together, there is tremendous opportunity there. So that's the point I wanted to make. We're at 12 o'clock. So I'm not unfortunately going to get to answer any of the ask any of the questions of my panelists. But as Medea noted, if anybody has questions, please, you know, submit them via email. We'd be happy to reach out to them. I think we're going to provide contact info and resources for all the panelists. You know, if anyone has questions about any of the programs, you know, we'd be happy to serve as a resource moving forward. And obviously, you know, we'd love for you to do everything you can to support USGBC and get involved in USGBC so we can keep, you know, bringing you valuable content like this in the future.
Absolutely. Very well said, Matt. That was so much information. I know you had more that you were going to cover as well.
I told you we can't get to renewable energy. You know what I mean? Like just energy efficiency is, yeah.
That's right. So I'm going to share the links. I'm going to pull the links out of Ben's presentation as well. I put a lot of links in the chat. And if you have follow-up questions, just send me an email. We're recording. We're going to post this to YouTube later and share the link with you. If you're here for CEUs, you get them for attending in person, and we will submit those on your behalf. And I think the only other thing is that I wanted to say thank you to our panelists so much. This is terrific information, and I wish we could have had double the time with you, but 90 minutes seems to be the sweet spot for attendees. So thank you again, and I look forward to following up with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you, everyone.